What's up, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down what's happening with the overall market moving forward, as we saw a very nice looking dump today, despite the bullish technicals that were developing on Friday. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed 15 in total. Not to mention 8.1% APY. Soft runs very soon, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, now let's talk about what's happening with Tesla. Looking at Tesla, we saw a very interesting move. Tesla was continuing to hold up very nicely today, getting a nice little push before getting this big rejection. That is something that's becoming very common for Tesla. We pumped and dumped in August, pumped and dumped many times. You can see how Tesla has been performing recently. So the question is, will Tesla dump even more? What happened today? Why was Tesla pumping while the market was sinking before it started to see a sell-off? What happened? So in the morning, Tesla pushed up to 220 before we got the sell-off. We started off very strongly because of some bullish news. The bullish news was the fact that, if anything, we saw Chinese sales up about 17% month over month in August, not to mention up 3% year over year, selling over 86,697 Chinese made EVs in August alone. That's a good piece of news for Tesla. That's why Tesla was up. Not to mention a lot of news coming out about how Tesla has a new possible Model Y variant coming out where they could be having 6 seats. So that was very great news. Investors were very excited. However, it wasn't really enough to save Tesla. I just want to make that very clear. There's also been some talk about how the October 10th Robotaxi event is going to be at a Warner Bros. Studio in Los Angeles. Great news for Tesla. It's going to get a lot of attention nonetheless. So that being said, guys, Tesla had some good news. That's why Tesla was pushing in the morning. Good sales in China, good growth, and new rumors and potential reports about a new Model Y variant. Awesome stuff in my personal opinion. But then Tesla started dumping because the whole market dumped. The whole market was dumping together, and that's what dragged Tesla down. The first thing that happened was we got manufacturing numbers. The manufacturing numbers were very mixed, and as a result, the market dumped. And then this news came out for Nvda. Nvda was basically just announcing that it's going to be under a DOJ investigation right now over antitrust issues. That's some huge news that came out. That's part of why Nvidia ended up dumping, not to mention other factors. Nvidia lost hundreds of billions in its market cap. And then we also saw, billions, if not close to trillions of dollars exit the stock market and move elsewhere. And then we saw the market sell off like crazy as a result of this. So Nvidia tanked, semiconductors tanked, which dragged the market lower. And then they continued to sell off, all these different stocks. So what's happening with the markets? Usually September and October are bearish months. And this year we saw something very interesting. Usually, what happens is in September, the market actually holds up for the first half. Then during the second half, that's when we get the sell off. But this year, it looks like it's coming a little bit earlier. It looks like it's very different from what we see from usual. So instead of holding up, the market got that little sell off. Right now, for the markets, greed is making up the majority of sentiment, but it's getting closer to neutral. I think it's going to shift by tomorrow. Momentum is now at neutral. It's slowing down as well. Then we also have the puts and call option ratio going up as we're starting to see a lot more puts being bought over the last 5 days. And volatility is neutral as this is starting to push higher as the VIX is starting to break out. So this is once again a big sign that the market's shifting. For earnings, don't forget we have Dick's Sporting Goods tomorrow, not to mention NEO, and then Big Lots on Friday. And for Tesla, William Blair still gave Tesla a bullish rating. The price pairs ratio is going up a bit now. It's just kind of flat as Tesla still has some weakness. And historically, Wednesdays are only green about 48% of the time. Tesla also had about 76 million volume, so not bad whatsoever. So we'll see how things develop from here. So what's happening to the markets? What is the catalyst for tomorrow? One more thing worth noting is that tomorrow we have some important jobs numbers coming out. Tomorrow is going to be Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. At 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the JOLTS job openings and job quits reports. So look for some volatility then. And just know the data itself is not everything. So the data is used as an excuse to move the markets. If we get good data, they can still dump the markets. If we get bad data, they can still dump things or pump things. It depends on what kind of reaction we get. Sometimes it's hard to predict because of manipulation. So be prepared for that. Whatever happens at 10 o'clock a.m., it's going to cause some high volatility. Anyways, that's enough about data and news. Let's focus on the charts now, what's happening to Tesla. So there's many different interpretations of how you could actually look at Tesla. It is possible we have like an inverse head and shoulders right here. If Tesla holds the 202 low and we don't lose that, then yes, this inverse head and shoulders could play out. And Tesla could look for a rally later on. But at the same time, one could also argue that this is looking like an inverse cup and handle, and Tesla's about to be dumping. So it depends on interpretation, however you want to interpret this. I would say the best thing to do is just look at levels instead. So Tesla has resistance at this 210 area. If that breaks, look for 212 and 215. Our supports at 207 around that area. If the 207s fails, we're going down to 205, followed by 202. In my opinion, we look a little bit more bearish looking at the 4 hour time frame as the PPO is turning weaker. And then the daily charts, sorry, not the weekly, the daily is also looking a little bit weaker as we're slowing down. We have a bearish looking daily candlestick, so I think this favors downside. So I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow we rebound a bit, and then we might continue to dip towards like 205 if the market continues to get that sell off after the Jolt Shop openings report. So we'll see how things go. But I just want to say that this technical setup does favor downside a little bit more. Technicals do tend to be correct the majority of the time, but they're not always perfect as unexpected moves could come. But I still favor downside a little bit more looking at this with this setup and the way the market is performing. So just be very mindful of that. For SPY, we look weak on the daily, but notice this trend. So SPY was completely range bound for over 2 weeks, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Then we pushed higher. We actually pushed up, and it looked like it was about to break out of this range, only for them to trap a lot of bulls and then just smack this right back down. And then instead of getting stopped at our range at support at 556, we lost key support, which is a big sign of weakness. So SPY is very simple. Look at 550 as key support. If 550 fails us, we're going to be going down to about 547 towards our 50 EMA, followed by the gap fill to 543. If we hold 550, we look at resistance at 553, not to mention 556, but this chart is looking more bearish nonetheless, and I think the daily does suggest that SPY may be dipping even lower. So just wanted to call that out. The 4 hours showing some weakness, and there might be a risk of a bearish divergence breakdown on SPY. I presume what's going to happen is we might rebound a little bit, look for a little counter trend move. And if we reject and we don't reclaim 556, I think we will eventually make our way back down to that gap fill into the 540s. So just be very careful. I think that we might rebound tomorrow morning, then we could continue to dip lower. But that's the most likely possibility. We look pretty weak right now, especially on the daily. On ES, we still look kind of weak right here. We're below our 200 EMA. The 200 EMA is right over here at this 55.48 area. If we don't reclaim this, we're going to likely get even lower. So look at resistance at about 55.50. If that breaks, look for 55.80. And if we lose support at 55.17, we're going to be dipping down to some balance towards 55 or 54.80. So I think what's going to happen is we might rebound a little bit, and then there's going to be a risk of us dipping lower to this imbalance. This might attract us lower if we hold below the 200 EMA. And that's what I find to be the most likely possibility. SPX is looking a little bit weaker, but we're barely holding support at about 55.25. If 55.25 fails us, we'll be dipping down to this gap fill for 54.50. If we hold this, we could rebound to 55.80. But I see a risk of us dipping lower as we have a double top leg structure. So you want to be very, very careful, guys. There is a risk of some downside, in my personal opinion. What's leading the market down is Nvda. This is going to likely continue to sink. We had this big news about how the DOJ is investigating them, and then there's a lot of like bearish momentum that's been building since earnings. Now, we were holding our 200 EMA very nicely. If we had held this, we could have rebounded. But if we lost this, we would turn bearish. I was hoping we would hold it, but instead we got this big dip and we ended up losing it. So now we're looking more bearish. We're going to be looking at basically 108 as resistance, followed by 112. And then if we end up losing 108, we're going to be looking for a move all the way down for 103, followed by the gap fill, or not the gap fill, the imbalance fill for 100 flat. So I think what's going to happen is we pop a bit, then we start dipping, and I think that 100 flat is coming, which is going to drag the market lower. That's what I favor for now. Bitcoin looks a little bit weaker. We're looking at resistance around 58,500. Our main support's at 57,000, excuse me. If that fails us, we're going all the way down to about 55,000. So look for some downside potential in Bitcoin as we have a head and shoulders like structure. Unfortunately, Bitcoin's looking a little bit weaker, but watch 57,000 is our key support. For others out there, such as the QQQ, the triple Q looks a little bit more bearish as we're making lower highs and lower lows. We also lost our key support, so it failed to get that breakout, and we also have like a bearish structure. We lost this channel, which is a bad sign, and we lost the low from last Thursday. So look at resistance at about 465. If we break back above that, we could turn back up for 468 plus. If we don't reclaim 460, we're going to be looking for a dip all the way down for 458, followed by this imbalance fill for 453. So I presume we're going to be dipping lower for basically the 458 area or lower. I think there's going to be a risk of more downside looking at the way things are developing. So I think the QQQ has more downside potential. We could rebound first and continue lower. We're going to likely be looking at the 450s very soon. I also want to mention that for the QQQ, we have this gap to fill down here. That's going to take us all the way down to about 451. We might rebound first, retest 464, then continue lower, but we still look more bearish, especially with semiconductors like Nvidia continuing to fall. For NQ, just like Nvidia looks bearish, we need to reclaim 19,400 to turn back up. Otherwise, we're at risk of dipping down to about the 18,000s. We're barely at 18,975 right now, and I could be looking for imbalances to fill below to drag us even lower. So that could take us all the way down for that 18,600 area. For Apple, Apple's not looking that great, unfortunately. We have a double top like structure. If we reclaim 224, we could turn back up for 226. And if we end up losing, if we don't hold this 222 support, I think we're dipping down to 218. This looks like a double top. We're looking bearish on the daily. So I think we might be testing 218 by tomorrow. Looks a little bit more bearish. I mean, we'll see what kind of reaction we get. We have this gap to fill as well around this 217.65 area. So I think the 218 zone is coming for more downside as the most likely possibility. For Palantir, we look a little bit more bearish. We're looking at 30.38 as support. If that fails us, we're dipping down to 28.5. Our resistance is going to be at about 31.4. I presume what's going to happen is we're going to dip lower. We could rebound a bit and start dipping, and I think that the 28s could be coming, especially if 30 fails. So I do see a risk of some downside. For Supermicro, Supermicro looks a little bit more bearish as well. I think there's a good chance we may be dipping a little bit lower. We're making lower highs thus far, so I do see that as looking a little bit weak. But it depends on the levels because despite the fact that it's on a downtrend, we're starting to just consolidate. We've been doing this for the last couple of days. So I think the best thing to do is just watch these levels. If we reclaim 464, we could be looking for 487. And then if that breaks, we're looking for the gap fill to the 500s. If we lose 428, we're going back down to 400 flat. As of right now, we're going back and forth between 428 and 464. So I presume that's going to be the most likely possibility. So watch and see if that ends up being the case. For Rivian, we could be dipping a little bit lower as well. We have this resistance to watch for up here around this 13.75 area. Our main support is going to be at this imbalance towards 12.94. Looking at the structure, we have like a nice looking head that's kind of like a cup, not like a head, like a cup right here. It's going to be our handle. So it looks like an inverse cup and handle. It looks a little bit more bearish to me. If we don't hold above this 12.87 area, we could be dipping down to fill this gap, taking us all the way down towards 12. So I see a risk of us dipping lower on Rivian. We need to reclaim 14.6 for to turn back up, but this is likely going to be dipping down for that gap fill, in my personal opinion. For SoFi, we're looking a little bit weaker. We have this yellow trend line as support. We're starting to lose this. We need to reclaim that. Otherwise, we're at risk of dipping down to about 7.3, eventually 7.16. So I see some weakness developing on SoFi. We got to reclaim support. Otherwise, we're going to likely start dipping. I think that's looking a little bit more favorable in my personal opinion. For IWM, I think we look a little bit weaker. I just want to say that the IWM it has a key 50 EMA right over here at this 212 area. Watch 212 as support. If we lose this, I think we could be tipping down for this gap fill for 208. If we break past this, we're going to be looking for 215 as resistance. I favor that 212 is coming, followed by the gap fill all the way down for 208. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. I favor downside a little bit more, especially as we have a double top. So watch to see if that ends up being the case. For AMD, AMD is also looking a little bit more bearish right here. We have resistance at this 140 area, and we have this key support all the way down here around 134. So I think that we might be dipping lower because of Nvidia and the semiconductors dipping. I think AMD is getting dragged down. We could be dipping all the way down towards 134, then eventually 130. AMD, if it reclaims 136, look for the gap fill for that 144 area. And if we don't reclaim, then we're going to likely be dipping. I favor it's going to be dipping down for the next gap fill towards 118. So I think it's more favorable that it comes down. So watch for that very carefully. For Coinbase, I just want to say that Coin is also looking kind of lackluster right now. The reason for that is because of the fact that this is continuing to dip. And I think that we have this very, very key looking imbalance over here that's forming. So if you look at coin, we look bearish right now as we have a double top leg structure. And then we're making a lower high relative to the high up there. So it makes me think that this is going to dip lower. So unfortunately for all the crypto enthusiasts out there, we are looking bearish on coin. And I think that we might be dipping for 162. If we reclaim 170, Flats, we could rebound, but it's looking less likely. Looks like 162 is most likely coming. We'll see if we bounce off that or not. Amazon still has potential. It's just range bound right now. If we break 178, look for 180 plus. And if we end up losing 175, look for 170.52. In my personal opinion, I think that we're just range bound on Amazon. So we'll have to see if we can break resistance or not. But right now, we're looking very range bound, and we'll have to see what kind of reaction we get. For Meta's looking a little bit more bearish. If we lose 505, we're going to be looking for a dip all the way down for this gap fill for 475. And we have resistance at 516, so we'll see which way we go. But there is a risk of some downside, in my opinion. For Microsoft, just to double check this, we look a little bit more bearish. This kind of looks like a head and shoulders now. We're looking at support at 405. If 405 fails this, we're going to be looking for this gap fill, taking us all the way down to about 395. We have resistance at 416 and 422, but I think that this is favoring downside a little bit more in my personal opinion. For Google's looking a little bit more bearish. We're actually continuing to reject right over here. I think that we're barely holding 159 as key support. If that fails us, we'll be tipping all the way down towards 153. We have resistance on 166, but I think this is favoring downside. I think we might be looking for a dip on Google. So watch for that very carefully. For GameStop, we're trying to rebound a bit, but it's not doing that great of a job. We're looking at our support at 22.73, and resistance is going to be very close to about 26. This might be dipping a little bit lower. We could be looking for this gap for the 21s. So that's looking very favorable to me, at least for GameStop. For AMC, we have these wicks forming. We're kind of dipping right up here. We could be getting very close to about this 4.4 area. DJT looks more bearish, could be dipping down for the 17.5 area or lower. We still look more bearish. Could dip a little bit more from here. The VIX is looking a little bit more bullish, however. The VIX is up 33%. We'll see how well it holds up if it continues or not. We have these imbalances to fill into like 23 area. So we'll see about that, guys. You want to be very careful nonetheless about that. 10 years kind of flat as well. And then the dollar is in a very, very critical place. So the dollar is going to do something interesting. So we're at resistance at the 20 EMA. If we reject like this, maybe the market rebounds a bit before it continues higher. If this is the pivot zone around this 100 area, but if we do the opposite, if we just straight up break out from here, this could be bearish for the market. So it depends on if the dollar gets a break of our 20 EMA or not. That could also affect the markets. The dollar is at support. You guys can see it kind of like bounce off this area. It does love to bounce around the 100 area historically. So now the dollar might try to rebound. If it does rebound more from here and break past 101.96, this could be a bearish signal, at least for the markets moving forward. So with that being said, I want to thank you all so much for listening. As far as Tesla goes, we are still looking kind of weak right now. Tesla is getting dragged down by the markets, and sometimes unfortunate things could happen. So I just want to say, guys, in my video yesterday, I was looking at the charts at the time, and the market was looking bullish. We were holding it very nicely. We saw a very bullish close on Friday, but that was manipulation by these institutions because they ended up dumping things just right after, and that was a trap for retail. So sometimes the market could do that. Sometimes completely unexpected moves could come. There's no way I could have predicted that the market would get a negative reaction to the data that was this severe. And I couldn't have predicted that that Nvidia would just get investigated by the DOJ. So I couldn't have predicted that Nvidia and the semiconductors would just crash 10% after this news came out. I had to see the news to really make that call. So sometimes completely unpredictable things could happen, and you just have to be very open-minded that that's a part of day trading, and we have to live up to our mistakes. I'm a human. I make mistakes. I admit that. And I just want to say that I will continue to grow from them and continue to do what I do best, which is try to be unbiased while giving you guys what I think is, my prediction anyways. But that's why it's very important to watch your levels, and you have to be very adaptive. You want to be like water. You want to be able to watch and see what the market is doing. If the market is looking more bearish, kind of like follow the trend. There's a saying that goes, the trend is your friend. Don't always try to go against it. And sometimes crazy things can happen in the markets. All these anomalies are just a part of manipulation. And the best thing we can really do is just do the best we can, manage risks very well. Don't be overly confident. Don't go all in on one position, because if you mess up, you could take a massive loss. Not financial advice, I'm just saying. And I'm just here to help you guys out. So I will continue to do what I do. There will sometimes be days where I could be completely wrong when unexpected news could come out. I can't always predict the next pandemic or the next war or anything like that, but I can tell you that I will do my best to continue to improve. I will tell you guys what the charts tell us in real time, what they're suggesting is the most likely possibility. And with that being said, you always want to just keep your heads up. So keep your heads up, guys. Don't be discouraged by a bad day. It happens to everyone. It's okay. Tomorrow's a new day. Hopefully, you guys manage risks very well and you guys are prepared for a new day. It's a new day, a new beginning. Let's restart. Let's get our minds cleared and let's make a very, very big comeback for tomorrow. With that being said, get ready for the data coming out for tomorrow. We have the JOLTS job openings report and job quits at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be back tomorrow before the market opens to give you guys another update. So until then, have a great day, night, or evening, wherever you guys are around the world. And I'll see you guys very soon tomorrow. Thank you for listening and peace out.